Book 1, chapters 58 to chapter 60, from Prophecies and Revelations of Saint Bridget of Sweden. The words of the mother to the bride, about how sweet the mother and the son are to each other, how Christ is bitter, bitterer, and most bitter for the evil, and how he is sweet, sweeter, and most sweet for the good. Chapter 58. The Mother of God said to the bride, "Consider, new bride of my Son, the suffering of my Son, which surpassed in bitterness the suffering of all the saints. Just as a mother would feel the most bitter sorrow and anguish if she ever saw her son being cut to pieces alive, so too was I grieving at the torments of my Son when I saw his bitter sufferings." Then she spoke to her son, saying, "Blessed be you, my son, for you are holy, as it is sung. Holy, holy, holy Lord God Sabaoth. Blessed be you, for you are sweet, sweeter, and most sweet. You were holy before you assumed manhood, holy in my womb, and holy after you assumed manhood. You were sweet before the creation of the world, sweeter to the angels, and most sweet to me, when you assumed manhood from me." The son answered, "Blessed be you, my beloved mother, above all the angels. Just as I, in a threefold way, was most sweet for you, as you were saying now, so I am bitter, bitterer, and most bitter for the wicked. I am bitter for those who say I have created many things without a reason, and who scornfully say, I have created mankind for death and not for life. What a miserable and foolish thought! Did I, who am the most righteous and virtuous, create the angels without a reason? Would I have enriched mankind with so many good things if I had created him for damnation? By no means. I created all things well, and gave every good to mankind out of my love. But he, however, turned all good things into evil for himself. It is not because I created anything evil, but mankind moves his will in another way than he should, and not according to God's law, and this is evil. But I am bitterer for those who say that I have given them a free will to sin and not to do good, who say I am unjust since I condemn some and justify others, and who blame me for their own wickedness because I withhold my grace from them. I am most bitter for those who say that my law and commandments are exceedingly harsh and difficult, and that no one is able to keep them, who say my suffering is worth nothing for them, and who therefore count it for nothing. Therefore, I swear by my life, as I once swore through the prophets, that I shall justify myself before the angels and all my saints. Those for whom I am bitter shall understand that I created all things reasonably and well for the use and education of mankind, and that not the smallest worm exists without a reason. Those for whom I am bitterer shall understand that I wisely gave men a free will for their own good. They will also know that I am just, giving the eternal kingdom to good men, but everlasting torment to the wicked. For it would not be proper for the devil, who was created good by me, but who fell through his own malice, to have fellowship with the good. The wicked will also understand that it is not my fault that they are evil, but their own fault. For if it were possible, I would gladly take upon myself the same torment for each and every man that I once suffered on the cross for all, if thereby they could return to their promised inheritance. But the will of mankind is always opposed to mine. I give him liberty to serve me, if he would, and to gain the eternal reward. But if he does not want to, he should be tormented together with the devil and his followers, for whose malice hell was justly created." But because I am full of charity, I do not want mankind to serve me out of fear or be forced to do so like an irrational animal, but out of love for God. For no one who serves me unwillingly or out of fear of torment can see my face. But those for whom I am most bitter will understand in their consciences that my law was most easy and my yoke most sweet. They will feel inconsolable sadness that they despised my law and, instead, loved the world, whose yoke is heavier and much more difficult than my yoke. Then the Mother of God answered, "Blessed be you, my Son, my God, and my Lord. Since you were most sweet for me, I beg of you that others may be made partakers of my sweetness." The Son answered, "Blessed be you, my most dear Mother. Your words are sweet and full of love. Therefore shall each and every one who takes your sweetness into his mouth and keeps it perfectly be benefited thereby. But the one who takes it and spits it out again will be tormented all the more bitterly." Then the Virgin answered, "Blessed be you, my Son, for all your mercy and love." The words of Christ in the presence of the bride, about how Christ is likened to a peasant, good priests to a good shepherd, bad priests to a bad shepherd, and good Christians to a wife. Many useful things are also explained in this parable. Chapter 59. I am the one who never said anything false. The world considers me to be a peasant whose name seems contemptible. My words are counted as foolish, and my house is considered a despicable shed. This peasant had a wife who wanted nothing other than what he wanted, who owned everything with him, and had him as her master, obeying him in all things as her master. This peasant also had many sheep, and he hired a shepherd to watch over them for 5 gold coins, and for the necessities of his bodily needs. Since this was a good shepherd, he used the gold to his benefit, and the food for his sustenance. After some time had gone by, this shepherd moved, and another shepherd came who was worse, who bought himself a wife with the gold, and brought her his food, constantly taking his rest with her, without caring about the sheep that were being lamentably scattered by cruel beasts. When the peasant saw how his sheep were being scattered, he cried out, saying, "My shepherd is unfaithful to me. My sheep are scattered by the most cruel beasts. Some of them are completely devoured by the beasts with body and fleece, while others are dead, but their bodies left uneaten." Then the wife said to her husband, the peasant, "My lord, it is certain that we will not get back the bodies that are devoured, but the bodies who have remained unharmed, even though they are without life, should be brought home and made use of by us. For it would be unbearable for us if we lost everything." The husband answered her, "But what shall we do? Since the animals had venomous teeth, the flesh of the sheep had also become poisoned with deadly venom. The hide is ruined, and the wool is all tangled." The wife answered, "If everything is infected and ruined, and everything taken from us, what shall we then live on?" The husband answered her, "I see that there are sheep still alive in 3 places. Some are like the dead sheep and do not dare to breathe out of fear. Other sheep are lying deep in filth and cannot raise themselves up. Still, others lie in hiding places and dare not come forth. Come, therefore, my wife, and let us lift up the sheep that are trying to raise themselves up, but cannot do so without help, and let us make use of them to our own benefit. Behold, I, the Lord, am this peasant. For men consider me to be a donkey raised in its stall according to its ways and habits. My name is the foundation of the Holy Church, but she is now considered to be contemptible. since the sacraments of the Church, namely baptism, confirmation, anointing, penance, and matrimony, are taken, as it were, with derision and given to others for the sake of greed. My words and deeds are considered and judged to be foolish and vain, for the words that I spoke in parables with my own mouth have now been converted from a spiritual understanding to temporal entertainment. My house is looked on as contemptible, for the things of the earth are loved instead of the things of heaven. With this first shepherd I symbolize my friends the priests, which I used to have in the Holy Church, for by a single word I mean and signify many. I entrusted them with my sheep, that is, to consecrate my most venerable body and to rule and defend the souls of my chosen ones. I also gave them 5 good things more precious than all gold. First, an insight and understanding about all abstruse things, so that they will be able to distinguish between good and evil, and between truth and falsehood. Second, I gave them understanding and wisdom in spiritual things. This has now been forgotten, and human wisdom is loved instead. Third, I gave them chastity. Fourth, temperance in all things, and abstinence for the restraining and guidance of their body. Fifth, steadfastness in good habits, words, and deeds. After this first shepherd, that is, after these friends of mine, who used to be in my church in days of old, other unrighteous shepherds came, that bought a wife for themselves with the gold. That is, they took to themselves the body of a woman, and intemperance, instead of chastity, and these 5 good things, and that is why my spirit departed from them. For when they have a complete will to sin, and to satisfy their wife, that is, to satisfy their lust, then my spirit is absent from them, since they do not care about the perdition of the sheep so long as they can fulfill their evil lust. But the sheep that are completely devoured are those whose soul are in hell, and whose bodies are buried in the grave, awaiting the resurrection of eternal damnation. The sheep whose flesh remains, but whose spirit is taken away, are those who neither love me, nor fear me, nor feel any devotion or care toward me. My spirit is far away from them, since their flesh is poisoned by the venomous teeth of the beasts, that is, their soul and their thoughts, which are symbolized by the sheep's flesh and intestines, are in every way as disgusting to me and as repulsive to taste as is poisoned meat. From their hide, that is, from their body, has all goodness and charity dried out, and it is unfit for any service in my kingdom, and shall be delivered to the everlasting fire of hell after the judgment. Their wool, that is, their deeds, are so altogether useless that there is nothing in them that would make them worthy to receive my love and grace. But what shall we do then, my wife, that is, good Christians, whom the wife symbolizes? What should we do? I see that sheep are alive in 3 places. Some of them look like the dead sheep, and do not dare to breathe out of fear. These are the Gentiles, who would gladly have the right faith if only they knew how, but who do not dare to breathe, that is, they do not dare to leave the faith that they have and take the right faith. The second sheep are those lying in hiding places who do not dare to come forth, and these are the Jews who live, so to speak, under a veil, and who would gladly come forth if they knew for certain that I was born. They namely hide themselves under a veil, since their hope for salvation is in the figures and signs that used to symbolize me in the old law, but which in truth have been fulfilled in me. And because of this vain hope, they are afraid to come forth to the right faith. The third sheep that lie in the filth are Christians in this state of mortal sin. They would gladly raise themselves up because of their fear of the torment, but they cannot due to their heavy sins, and because they have no divine love. Therefore, my wife, that is, good Christians, help me. For just as a wife and a man should be one flesh and one limb, so the Christian is my limb, and I am his, since I am in him, and he is in me. Therefore, O wife of mine, that is, good Christians, run with me to the sheep that still have a breath of life, and let us lift them up and refresh them. Have compassion on me, for I bought them at a very high price. Let us lift them up, you with me, and me with you, you at the back, and I at the head. I gladly carry them with my hands. Once I carried them all on my back when it was all lacerated and fastened to the cross. O my friends, I loved these sheep so dearly that, if it were possible for me to suffer such a death for each sheep as I once suffered on the cross for all of them, I would rather redeem them than want to lose them. That is why I cry out to my friends with all my heart, that they should not spare goods or work for my sake. For if I was not spared from reproaching and insulting words while I was in the world, they should not spare themselves in speaking the truth about me. I was not ashamed to suffer a contemptible death for their sake, but stood there naked, just as I was born, before the eyes of my enemies. I was struck in the teeth with their fists. I was dragged by the hair with their fingers, and scourged by their scourges. I was fastened to the cross with their tools, and I hung on the cross between thieves and robbers. Therefore, my friends, do not spare yourself in working for me, since I endured such things out of love for you. Work manfully and bring help to all my sheep in distress. I swear by my manhood, which is in the Father, as the Father is in me, and by my divinity, which is in my spirit, as the Spirit is in the divinity, and the same Spirit is in me, and I in him. And these are one God in three persons, that I shall run out to meet those halfway who work in carrying my sheep with me, and help them. And I shall give them the most precious reward, namely, myself unto their everlasting joy. The words of the Son to the bride about the three kinds of Christians that are symbolized by the Jews living in Egypt, and about how the things which have been revealed to the bride should be transmitted, published, and preached to the ignorant persons by the friends of God. Chapter 60. The Son of God spoke to the bride and said, I am the God of Israel, and the one who spoke with Moses. When Moses was sent to my people, he begged for a sign, saying, The people will not believe me otherwise. But if the people to whom Moses was sent were the Lord's people, why did they not believe? You should know that this people consisted of three kinds of men. Some believed in God and Moses. Others believed in God but distrusted Moses, in that they thought that he, perhaps of his own invention and presumption, had presumed to say and do these things. The third were those who neither believed in God nor in Moses. In the same way, there are now three kinds of men among Christians who are symbolized by the Hebrew people. There are some who rightly believe in God and in my words. There are others who believe in God but distrust my words, because they cannot distinguish between the good and the evil spirit. The third are those who neither believe in me nor in you, to whom I have spoken my words. But as I said, even though some of the Hebrews distrusted Moses, nevertheless they all went through the Red Sea with him and into the desert, where those who had not believed worshipped idols and provoked God into wrath, which is why they also died in the most miserable of deaths. But only those who had an evil faith did so. Therefore, my friend shall carry my words to those who believe him, since the human soul is slow to believe, and these shall afterward spread them to others who do not know how to distinguish between the good and the evil spirit. But if the hearers beg them for a sign, let them show those men the staff just as Moses did. That is, let them explain my words to them. For just as the staff of Moses was straight and terrifying, for it was transformed into a snake, so are my words straight so that no falsehood can be found in them. They are terrifying since they proclaim the righteous judgment. Let them also explain and testify that, by a word and sound of a single mouth, the devil yielded from the creature of God, he who could move mountains, if he were not restrained by my power. What kind of power belonged to him when, with God's permission, he was driven away by the sound of a single word? Therefore, just as those Hebrews, who neither believed in God nor in Moses, yet went out of Egypt for the promised land when they, as it were forced along together with the others, so too many Christians go out unwillingly together with my chosen men, since they do not trust in my power to heal them. They do not believe in my words, and they have a false hope in my power. Nevertheless, my words shall be fulfilled without their will, and shall be, as it were, forced along to fulfillment until they get to the place that pleases me. From Prophecies and Revelations by St. Bridget of Sweden. Book 2. The Son's instruction to the bride about the devil. The Son's answer to the bride about why he does not remove evildoers before they fall into sin, and about how the kingdom of heaven is given to baptized persons who die before reaching the age of discretion. Chapter 1. The Son spoke to the bride, saying, When the devil tempts you, tell him these 3 things. The words of God cannot be anything but true. Second, nothing is impossible for God, because he can do all things. Third, you, devil, could not give me so great a fervor of love as that which God gives me. Again the Lord spoke to the bride, saying, I look at people in 3 ways. First, their outer body and what condition it is in. Second, their inner conscience, what it tends toward and in what way. Third, their heart and what it desires. Like a bird that sees a fish in the sea and assesses the depth of the water, and also takes note of the storm winds, I too know and assess the ways of each person, and take note of what is due for each. For I am keener of sight and can assess the human situation better than a person knows his own self. Therefore, because I see and know all things, you might ask me why I do not take evildoers away before they fall into the depths of sin. I myself asked the question, and I myself will answer it for you. I am the Creator of all things, and all things are foreknown to me. I know and see all that has been, and all that will be. But, although I know and can do all things, still, for reasons of justice, I no more interfere with the natural constitution of the body than I do with the inclination of the soul. Each human being continues in existence according to the natural constitution of the body, such as it is and was from all eternity in my foreknowledge. The fact that one person has a longer life and another a shorter has to do with natural strength or weaknesses, and is related to a person's physical constitution. It is not due to my foreknowledge that one person loses his sight or another becomes lame, or something like that, since my foreknowledge of all things is such that no one is the worse for it, nor is it harmful to anyone. Moreover, these things do not occur because of the course and position of the heavenly elements, but due to some hidden principle of justice in the constitution and conservation of nature. For sin and natural disorder bring about the deformity of the body in many ways. This does not happen because I will it directly, but because I permit it to happen for the sake of justice. Even though I can do all things, still I do not obstruct justice. Accordingly, the length of brevity of a person's life is related to the weakness or strength of his physical constitution, such as it was in my foreknowledge that no one can contravene. You can understand this by way of a simile. Imagine that there were two roads with one road leading up to them. There were a great many graves in both roads, crossing and overlapping one another. The end of one of the two roads dropped directly downward. The end of the other tended upward. At the crossroads was written, "Whoever travels this road begins it in physical pleasure and delight, and ends it in great wretchedness and shame. Whoever takes the other road begins it in moderate and endurable exertion, but reaches the end in great joy and consolation." A person walking along on the single road was completely blind. However, when he reached the crossroads, his eyes were opened, and he saw what was written about how the two roads ended. While he was studying the sign and thinking it over to himself, there suddenly appeared next to him two men who were entrusted with guarding the two roads. As they observed the wayfarer at the crossroads, they said to each other, "Let us carefully observe which road he chooses to take, and then he will belong to that one of us whose road he selects." The wayfarer, however, was considering to himself the ends and advantages of each road. He made the prudent decision of selecting the road whose beginning involved some pain, but had joy at the end, rather than the road that began in joy but ended in pain. He decided that it was more sensible and endurable to get tired from a little exertion at the start, but rest in safety at the end. Do you understand what all this means? I shall tell you. These two roads are the good and the evil within human reach. It lies within a person's power and free will to choose whatever he or she likes upon reaching the age of discretion. A single road leads up to the two roads of the choice between good and evil. In other words, the time of childhood leads up to the age of discretion. The man walking on the first road is like a blind man, because he is, as it were, blind from his childhood up until he reaches the age of discretion, not knowing how to distinguish between good and evil, between sin and virtue, between what is commanded and what is forbidden. The man walking on this first road, that is, in the age of boyhood, is like a blind man. However, when he reaches the crossroads, that is, the age of discretion, the eyes of his understanding are opened. He then knows how to decide whether it is better to experience a little pain but eternal joy, or a little joy and eternal pain. Whichever road he chooses, he will not lack those who carefully count his steps. There are many graves on these roads, one after the other, one over against the other, because both in youth and in old age, one person may die earlier, another later, one in youth, another in old age. The end of this life is fittingly symbolized by graves. It will come to everyone, one in this way, another in that, according to each one's natural constitution and exactly as I have foreknown it. If I took anyone away against the body's natural constitution, the devil would have grounds of accusation against me. Accordingly, in order that the devil might not find anything in me that goes against justice in the least, I no more interfere with the natural constitution of the body than I do with the constitution of the soul. But consider my goodness and mercy. For, as the teacher says, I give virtue to those who do not have any virtue. By reason of my great love, I give the kingdom of heaven to all of the baptized, who die before reaching the age of discretion. As it is written, it has pleased my Father to give the kingdom of heaven to such as these. By reason of my tender love, I even show mercy to the infants of pagans. If any of them die before reaching the age of discretion, given that they cannot come to know me face to face, they go instead to a place that is not permitted for you to know, but where they will live without suffering. Those who have advanced from the one road reach those two roads, that is, the age of discretion, between good and evil. It is then in their power to choose what pleases them most. Their reward will follow the inclination of their will, since by that time they know how to read the sign written at the crossroads telling them that it is better to experience a little pain at the start and joy ready and waiting for them than experience joy at the start and pain at the end. Sometimes it does not happen that people are taken away earlier than their natural physical constitution would normally allow. For example, through homicide, drunkenness, and things of that kind. This is because the devil's wickedness is such that the sinner, in this case, would receive an extremely long-lasting punishment if he were to continue in the world for any great length of time. Therefore, some people are taken away earlier than their natural physical condition would allow due to the demands of justice and because of their sins. Their removal has been foreknown to me from all eternity, and it is impossible for anyone to contravene my foreknowledge. Sometimes good people are also taken away earlier than their natural physical constitution would allow. Because of the great love I have toward them, and because of their burning love and their efforts to discipline the body for my sake, justice sometimes requires that they be taken away, as foreknown to me from all eternity. Thus, I no more interfere with the natural constitution of the body than I do with the constitution of the soul. The son's indictment of a certain soul who was to be condemned in the presence of the bride, and Christ's answer to the devil about why he permitted this soul, and permits other evildoers, to touch and take or receive his own true body. Chapter 2. God appeared angry and said, "This work of my hands, whom I destined for great glory, holds me in much contempt. This soul, to whom I offered all my loving care, did three things to me. He averted his eyes from me, and turned them toward the enemy. He fixed his will on the world. He put his confidence in himself, because he was free to sin against me. For this reason, because he did not bother to have any regard for me, I brought my sudden justice upon him. Because he had fixed his will against me, and put false confidence in himself, I took away from him the object of his desire. Then a devil cried out, saying, 'Judge, this soul is mine.' The judge answered, 'What grounds do you bring against him?' He answered, 'My accusation is the statement in your own indictment that he despised you, his creator, and because of that his soul has become my handmaid. Besides, since he was suddenly taken away, how could he suddenly begin to please you? For, when he was of sound body and living in the world, he did not serve you with a sincere heart, since he loved created things more fervently, nor did he bear illness patiently, or reflect on your works as he ought to have. In the end, he was not burning with the fire of charity. He is mine because you have taken him away suddenly.' The judge answered, 'A sudden end does not condemn a soul, unless there is an inconsistency in her actions. A person's will is not condemned forever without careful deliberation.' Then the Mother of God came and said, 'My son, If a lazy servant has a friend who is on intimate terms with his master, should not his intimate friend come to his aid? Should he not be saved if he asks for it, for the sake of the other? The judge answered, Every act of justice should be accompanied by mercy and wisdom. Mercy with respect to remitting severity, wisdom to ensure that equity is maintained. But if the transgression is of such a kind as not to deserve remission, the sentence can still be mitigated for the sake of friendship without infringing justice. Then his mother said, My blessed son, this soul had me constantly in mind, and showed me reverence, and was often moved to celebrate the great solemnity for my sake, even though he was cold towards you. So have mercy on him. The son answered, Blessed mother, you know and see all things in me. Even though this soul kept you in mind, he did so more for the sake of his temporal welfare than for his spiritual welfare. He did not treat my most pure body as he should have. His foul mouth kept him from enjoying my charity. Worldly love and dissolution hid my suffering from him. His taking my pardon too much for granted and not thinking about his end accelerated his death. Although he received me continuously, it did not improve him much, because he did not prepare himself properly. A person who wishes to receive his noble lord and guest should not only get the guest room ready, but also all the utensils. This man did not do so, since, although he cleaned the house, he did not sweep it reverently with care. He did not strew the floor with the flowers of his virtues, or fill the utensils of his limbs with abstinence. Therefore, you see well enough that what must be done to him is what he deserves. Although I may be invulnerable and beyond comprehension, and am everywhere by reason of my divinity, my delight is in the pure, even if I enter the good and the damned alike. The good receive my body, which was crucified and ascended into heaven, which was prefigured by the manna and by the widow's flower. The wicked do so likewise, but, whereas for the good it leads to greater strength and consolation, for the wicked it leads to an even more just condemnation, inasmuch as they, in their unworthiness, are not afraid to approach so worthy a sacrament. The devil answered, If he approached you unworthily, and his sentence was made stricter because of this, why did you permit him to approach you and touch you despite his unworthiness? The judge answered, You are not asking this out of love, since you have none, but my power compels you to ask it for the sake of this bride of mine who is listening. In the same way in which both the good and bad handled me in my human nature, in order to prove the reality of my human nature as well as my patient humility, so too good and wicked alike eat me at the altar. The good unto their greater perfection, the bad in order that they may not believe themselves to be already damned, and so that, having received my body, they might be converted, provided they decide to reform their intention. What greater love can I show them than that I, the most pure, will enter even the impurest of vessels, although, like the material sun, I cannot be defiled by anything? You and your comrades despise this love, for you have hardened yourselves against love. Then the mother spoke again. My good son, whenever he approached you, he was still reverent toward you, though not as he should have been. He also repents of having offended you, though not perfectly. My son, for my sake, consider this to his advantage. The son answered, As the prophet said, I am the true sun, although I am far better than the material sun. The material sun does not penetrate mountains or mines, but I can do both. A mountain can stand in the way of the material sun with the result that the sunlight does not reach the land nearby. But what can stand in my way except the sinfulness that prevents this soul from being affected by my love? Even if a part of the mountain were removed, the neighboring land would still not receive the warmth of the sun. And if I were to enter into one part of a pure mind, what consolation would it be to me if I could smell a stench from another part? Therefore, one should get rid of everything that is dirty, and then sweet enjoyment will follow upon beautiful cleanliness. His mother answered, "May your will be done with all mercy." Explanation. This was a priest who had often received warnings regarding his incontinent behavior, and who did not want to listen to reason. One day, when he went out to the meadow to groom his horse, there came thunder and lightning that struck and killed him. His whole body was left unscathed, except for his private parts, which could be seen to be completely burned. Then the Spirit of God said, "Daughter, those who get themselves entangled in such wretched pleasures deserve to suffer in their souls what this man suffered in his body." Prophecies and Revelations by Saint Bridget of Sweden. Words of amazement from the Mother of God to the bride, and about 5 houses in the world whose inhabitants represent 5 states of people, namely unfaithful Christians, obstinate Jews, and pagans separately, Jews and pagans together, and the friends of God. This chapter contains many useful remarks. Chapter 3. Mary said, "It is a terrible thing that the Lord of all things and the King of glory is despised. He was like a pilgrim on earth, wandering from place to place, knocking on many doors, like a wayfarer seeking welcome. The world was like an estate that had 5 houses. When my son came dressed as a pilgrim to the first house, he knocked on the door and said, 'Friend, open up and let me enter to rest and stay with you, so that the wild animals do not harm me, so that the storm showers and rain may not fall upon me. Give me some of your clothes to warm me up from the cold, to cover me in my nakedness. Give me some of your food to refresh me in my hunger, and something to drink to revive me. You will receive a reward from your God.' The person inside answered, 'You are far too impatient, so you are unable to live with us peaceably. You are far too tall. For that reason we are unable to clothe you. You are far too greedy and gluttonous, so we are unable to satisfy you. For there is no end to your greedy appetite.' Christ the pilgrim responded from outside, 'Friend, let me in cheerfully and voluntarily. I do not need much room. Give me some of your clothes, since there are no clothes in your house so small that they will not be able to offer me at least some warmth. Give me some of your food, since even a tiny morsel can satisfy me, and a mere drop of water will refresh and strengthen me.' The person inside replied, 'We know you well enough. You are humble in speech, but importunate in your requests. You seem easily contented, but are in fact insatiable when it comes to having your fill. You are far too cold and hard to clothe. Go away. I will not take you in.' Then he came to the second house and said, 'Friend, open up and look at me. I will give you what you need. I will defend you from your enemies.' The person inside answered, 'My eyes are weak. It would hurt them to look at you. I have plenty of everything, and I have no need of anything of yours. I am strong and powerful. Who can harm me?' Coming then to the third house, he said, 'Friend, lend me your ears and hear me. Stretch forth your hands and take hold of me. Open your mouth and taste me.' The inhabitant of the house answered, "Shout louder so I can hear you better. If you are nice, I will draw you to myself. If you are pleasant, I will let you in." Then he went to the fourth house, whose door was about half open. He said, "Friend, if you were to consider that your time has been uselessly spent, you would let me in. If you were to understand and to listen to what I have done for you, you would have compassion on me. If you paid heed to how much you have offended me, you would sigh and beg for forgiveness." The man answered, "We are nearly dead from waiting and longing for you. Have compassion on our wretchedness, and we will be most ready to give ourselves to you. Behold our misery and look on the anguish of our body, and we will be ready for your every wish." Then he came to the fifth house, which was completely open. He said, "Friend, I would gladly enter here, but know that I seek a softer resting place than that provided by a feather bed, a greater warmth than can be had from wool, a fresher food than fresh animal meat can offer." Those who were inside answered, "We have hammers lying here at our feet. We will gladly use them to shatter our feet and legs, and we will give you the marrow flowing from them to be your resting place. We will gladly open up our inmost parts and entrails for you. Come right in. There is nothing softer than our marrow for you to rest upon, and nothing better than our inmost parts to warm you. Our heart is fresher than the fresh meat of animals. We shall be happy to cut it up for your food. Just come in, for you are sweet to taste and wonderful to enjoy." The inhabitants of these 5 houses represent 5 different states of people in the world. The first are the unfaithful Christians who call my Son's sentences unjust, his promises false, and his commandments unbearable. These are the ones who in their thoughts and in their minds and in their blasphemy say to my Son's preachers, "Almighty he may well be, but he is far away and cannot be reached. He is high and wide and cannot be clothed. He is insatiable and cannot be fed. He is most impatient, and there is no getting along with him." They say he is far away because they are weak in good deeds and charity, and do not try to rise up to his goodness. They say he is wide because their own greediness knows no limit. They are always pretending they lack or need something, and are always imagining problems before they come. They also charge him with being insatiable, because heaven and earth are not enough for him, but he demands even greater gifts for mankind. They think it foolish to give up everything for the sake of their soul in accordance with the precept, and harmful to give the body less. They say he is impatient, because he hates vice and sends them things against their will. They think nothing is fine and useful except that which the pleasure of the body suggests to them. Of course, my Son is indeed almighty in heaven and on earth, the Creator of all things and created by none, existing prior to everything, after whom no one is to come. He is indeed farthest away and widest and highest, within and without, and above all things. Yet, although he is so powerful, still, in his love, he wants to be clothed with human help. He who has no need of clothing, who clothes all things and is himself clothed eternally and unchangeably in perpetual honor and glory. He who is the bread of angels and of men, who feeds all things and himself needs nothing, wants to be fed with human love. He who is the restorer and author of peace asks for peace from men. Therefore, whoever wants to welcome him in a cheerful mind can satisfy him with even a morsel of bread, so long as his intention is good. He can clothe him with a single thread, so long as his love is burning. A single drop can still his thirst, provided a person has the right dispositions. So long as a person's devotion is fervent and steadfast, he is capable of welcoming my Son into his heart and speaking with him. God is spirit, and, for that reason, he has willed to transform creatures of flesh into spiritual beings, and ephemeral beings into eternal ones. He thinks that whatever happens to the members of his body also happens to himself. He takes into account not only a person's work or abilities, but also the fervor of his will and the intention with which a work is carried out. In truth, the more my Son cries out to these people through hidden inspirations, and the more he admonishes them through his preachers, the more they harden their will against him. They do not listen or open the door of their will to him, or let him in by means of charitable acts. Therefore, when their time comes, the falsehood they rely on will be annihilated, truth will be exalted, and the glory of God made manifest. The second ones are obstinate Jews. These people seem to themselves to be reasonable in every way, and they regard wisdom as being legal justice. They assert their own deeds and hold them to be more honorable than the works of others. If they hear of the things my Son has done, they hold them in contempt. If they hear his words and commandments, they react with scorn. Worse still, they would regard themselves as sinful and unclean if they were but to hear and reflect on anything having to do with my Son, and as even more wretched and miserable if they were to imitate his works. But while the winds of worldly fortune still blow upon them, they think themselves most lucky. So long as their physical forces are sound, they believe themselves to be most strong. For that reason, their hopes will come to nothing, and their honor will turn into shame. The third ones are the pagans. Some of them cry out in mockery each day, "Who is this Christ? If he is gracious in giving present goods, we shall gladly receive him. If he is gentle in condoning sins, we shall even more gladly honor him." But these people have closed the eyes of their mind so as not to perceive the justice and mercy of God. They stop up their ears and do not hear what my Son has done for them, and for everyone. They shut their mouths and do not inquire what their future will be like, or what is to their advantage. They fold their arms and refuse to make an effort to search out the way in which they might escape lies and find the truth. Therefore, since they do not want to understand or take precautions, although they can and have the time to do so, they and their house will fall and be enveloped by the tempest. The fourth ones are those Jews and pagans who would like to be Christians, if they only knew how and in what way to please my Son, and if only they had a helper. They hear from people in neighboring regions every day, and also know from the appeals of love within themselves, as well as from other signs, how much my Son has done and suffered for everyone. This is why they cry out to him in their conscience and say, "O Lord, we have heard that you promised to give yourself to us, so we are waiting for you. Come and fulfill your promise." We see and understand that there is no divine power in those who are worshipped as gods, no love of souls, no appreciation of chastity. We only find in them carnal motives, a love for the honors of the present world. We know about the law and hear about the great works you have performed in mercy and justice. We hear from the sayings of your prophets that they were awaiting you whom they had foretold. So come, kind Lord. We would like to give ourselves to you, because we understand that in you there is love for souls, the right use of all things, perfect purity, and life everlasting. Come without delay and enlighten us, for we are nearly dead from waiting for you. That is how they cry out to my Son. This explains why their door is half open, because their intention is complete with respect to the good, but they have not yet attained its fulfillment. These are people who deserve to have the grace and consolation of my Son. In the 5th house are the friends of my Son and me. The door of their mind is completely open for my Son. They are glad to hear him calling. They not only open when he knocks, but joyfully run to meet him as he comes in. With the hammers of the divine precepts, they shatter anything they find distorted in themselves. They prepare a resting place for my Son, not out of feathers of birds, but out of the harmony of the virtues and the curbing of evil affections, which is the very marrow of all the virtues. They offer my Son a kind of warmth that does not come from the wool, but from a love so fervent that they not only give their belongings to him, but their very selves as well. They also prepare food for him that is fresher than any meat. It is their perfect heart that does not desire or love anything but its God. The Lord of heaven dwells in their hearts, and God, who nourishes all things, is sweetly nourished by their charity. They keep their eyes continually on the door, lest the enemy enter. They keep their ears turned toward the Lord, and their hands ready for doing battle against the enemy. Imitate them, my daughter, as far as you are able, because their foundation is built on solid rock. The other houses have their foundations in mud, which is why they will be shaken when the wind comes. The words of the Mother of God to her Son on behalf of his bride, and about how Christ is compared to Solomon, and about the severe sentence against false Christians. Chapter 4. The Mother of God spoke to her Son, saying, My son, look how your bride is crying because you have few friends and many enemies. The Son answered, It is written that the sons of the kingdom will be cast out and will not inherit the kingdom. It is likewise written that a certain queen came from far away to see the riches of Solomon and to hear his wisdom. When she saw it all, she was breathless from sheer amazement. The people of his kingdom, however, paid no attention to his wisdom, nor admired his riches. I am prefigured by Solomon, although I am far richer and wiser than Solomon was, inasmuch as all wisdom comes from me, and anyone who is wise gets his wisdom from me. My riches are eternal life and indescribable glory. I promised and offered these goods to Christians as to my own children, in order that they might possess them forever if they imitated me and believed in my words. But they pay no attention to my wisdom. They hold my deeds and my promises in scorn, and regard my riches as worthless. What shall I do with them then? Surely, if the sons do not want their inheritance, then strangers, that is, pagans, will receive it. Like that foreign queen, whom I take to represent faithful souls, they will come and admire the wealth of my glory and charity, so much so that they will fall away from their spirit of infidelity and be filled with my spirit. What then shall I do with the sons of the kingdom? I will deal with them in the manner of a skillful potter, who, when he observes that the first object he has made out of clay is neither beautiful nor usable, throws it to the earth and crushes it. I will deal with Christians in the same manner. Although they ought to be mine, since I formed them in my image and redeemed them with my blood, they have turned out to be pitiably deformed. Therefore, they will be trampled down like earth and thrown into hell. Welcome to the Virgo Potens YouTube channel. If you enjoy this video, give it a like. I also invite you to subscribe to this channel so that you won't miss new content. please prayerfully consider supporting my work by becoming a patron of Virgo Potens on Patreon and/or by buying one of my books. My ebooks are available on Amazon as well as on the Apple Bookstore. For those who prefer a physical copy rather than an ebook, my book, Spiritual Warfare, Know Thy Enemy, is also available as a paperback on Amazon. If you are interested in making a one-time contribution, I suggest that you do so by simply buying one of my books. I am thankful for your support. Links to Patreon and to my books will be posted in the comments section of this video. The continuation of this work isn't possible without you. Lastly, and most importantly, please pray for me. May the Virgin Most Powerful guide and protect you.